Our first speaker for this session is going to be Cleopatra of Vicks. She's a native of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, but she's called Atlanta home since 2007. She has a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering and is a certified project manager. Cleo worked in engineering and project management field for over 22 years, working for some Fortune 500 companies such as Procter & Gamble, Johnson & Johnson, and Ernst & Young. After 14 years in the private sector, she switched to the public sector. She's been with GDOT for the last 8 years. Cleopatra has worked in several assignments as a senior project manager and has worked as program manager over the past 5 years. She's managed projects in 5 of the 7 GDOT districts, which gives her a broad view of transportation issues around Georgia. She's currently the Express Lanes program manager, where she manages the Express Lanes projects that are all part of the major mobility investment program. Cleo spends her free time with her husband, Mike, who's a firefighter, and her 13-year-old dog, Jinx, working out and volunteering with her church. Cleo.
Good morning. Can you all hear me well? All right, I'm excited to be here to give you an update on the Express Lanes program. Today, I am going to discuss the Express Lanes vision and delivery approach, provide an update on the Express Lanes, and discuss some about the Express Lanes transit. So let's get started. So you can see, it's not moving. Oh, there we are. Sorry about that. So let's get started. So now this timeline that you can see, it spans about 10 years, but I wanted to start the history on the Express Lanes before this timeline. So Express Lanes are managed lanes, and they are just as they sound, lanes that are managed. Within Georgia, we have different types of managed lanes, HOV, HOT, and Express Lanes. We saw the first managed HOV lanes in the state in Metro Atlanta during the mid-90s, the HOV lanes along I-75 and 85 near the downtown connector. And in 2009, the Transportation Board adopted the Atlanta Regional Managed Systems Plan, Managed Lane Systems Plan, and it was the first regional managed lanes plan for the state and in the country. And so from that plan was developed the Managed Lane Implementation Plan that was finalized in 2015. So in 2013, where we pick up with this graph, ARC and GDOT adopted the Express Lane strategy as a way to mitigate congestion for the Atlanta metro area. So in 2014, as if you have been living in the area since that time, we started construction on the I-75 express lanes in the Northwest Corridor. And then in 2015, we received the HB 170 bill, also known as the Transportation Funding Act. 2016, Governor Deal announced the MMIP program, which is the Major Mobility Investments Program. These are very large projects, large in dollar, large in scope. And all of the express lanes that are in development are MMIP. They're usually over $1 billion, so large amounts of capital involved. So the MMIP from Governor Deal is a big deal, no pun intended. But in 2017, the I-75 South Metro Express lanes opened to traffic. 2018 was another big year for the program. Northwest Corridor opened to traffic and the I-85 Express lanes extension. The ATL was created to provide regional transit governance, and Fulton County developed the transit master plan. So you'll hear throughout the presentation me speak some about transit, because transit started to become a buzzword, if you will, where people were looking for other alternatives to travel as opposed to roads. And transit is becoming a big issue in the metro area. In 2019, I-285 mayors got together and started a transit feasibility study to inform us about early needs for transit along 285. And somewhere between 2019 to 2021, we had a procurement for SR 400 express lanes. We had an unsuccessful procurement in that we were not able to select a developer, and we took a step back after additional market research and talking to the industries and looking at our delivery approach. We changed our model. So the Northwest Corridor was procured as a design build finance model, or the AP model, meaning that we have a developer team that designs, builds, finances the project. They're paid back with the toll revenue over a period of time. Well, the revenue risk model is where a developer team will design, build, finance, operate, and maintain the express lanes for a period of 50 years, with them collecting the toll revenue on the project during that 50-year period. So in 2022, we announced to the industry updates to our MMIP program, and we restarted the procurement of the SR 400 express lanes with the revenue risk model. And so here we are today in 2023, where we're looking to select a developer for the SR 400 express lanes this year. And we're also looking to have a public hearing, open house for the I-285 express lanes toward the end of the year. So our vision, as you can see, is a comprehensive express lanes network for the region. And after all of the express lanes are in operation, we will have the largest express lanes network in the country. So we have a lot of great work that's been happening over time, and that's still in the pipeline to improve the congestion and the driver experience through the metro area. So a little bit more about express lanes. They are optional price managed lanes that complement existing interstates in some of the most congested corridors in metro Atlanta. They're travel options for motorists and transit customers to bypass the congestion. They provide more reliable trip times and improve traffic flow. And for public transit providers such as Express, MARTA, and state registered van pools, their users are able to ride in the express lanes with no additional cost. So there are a number of graphs in this presentation. I'll state right away that the primary audience for some of the graphs change. For this graph, it's showing that there are three colors of the express lanes. The purple is express lanes that are currently in operation. The green are in development, and the yellow are in long range. And so the value for the Georgia users and regarding the express lanes are safety improvements, additional capacity and access, transit options, promotes innovation, and also it helps produce a positive customer experience. This graph is the graph that we showed to the industry in 2022 when we pivoted to the new model. So it's largely speaking to the developer community and the construction community. And we took a look at the express lanes and we determined what are the right size construction packages. So you'll notice three colors here along with numbers. You'll see the numbers 1 for purple, that represents the SR 400 express lanes project, which is currently in procurement. You'll see a solid blue inverted T with the number 2 that represents the I-285 express lanes east project, and the number 3, which is gold, is the I-285 express lanes west project. So these 3 project segments will be procured as best value proposals using the revenue risk model. You'll also notice dotted lines to the project segments on I-285. So with the blue, the dotted line goes all the way to I-20 east, and those represent additional phases or extensions to the initial project segment. So I-285 east will be built in 3 phases. I-285 west will be built in 2 phases. Something else to notice about the extensions or the additional phases, the developers that are selected for the initial best value proposals will have the first rights to submit a value-based proposal for the extension projects. If it's not a proposal that GDOT accepts, then GDOT retains the rights to procure the remaining segments as additional procurements. So now we talk some about the project updates. So for SR 400, the project adds 2 buffer separated express lanes in each direction between the MARTA North Springs Station and McGinnis Ferry, and it adds 1 buffer separated express lane in each direction from McGinnis Ferry to McFarland Parkway. You'll notice on the graph the project limits, and it's showing access points. The green circles represent direct merge access, and the gold represents interchange. The SR 400 Express Lanes project received the infra grant, and we received a $186 million grant in 2018. And as part of the grant, the requirements are to begin construction within a relative reasonable amount of time. And because we restarted the procurement of SR 400 in order to fulfill the requirement of the infra grant, we advanced a portion of the project. So we accelerated the construction of 3 overpass bridges that I'll talk a little bit more about in the locations and its status. And that is considered phase 1. Phase 2 is the construction of the express lanes. We won't have time to go into the visualization, but if you go to the project website on the GDOT homepage, you'll be able to see the videos for I-285 and SR 400 express lanes. Now back to the SR 400 phase 1 bridge replacements. There will be 3, one at Pitts Road, Roberts Drive, and Kimball Bridge Road. These 4 Pitts and Roberts detours are planned, and there will be stage construction for Roberts Drive, so there's no detour at that location. The construction is underway. We began clearing in late 2022. We're finalizing utility relocations and staging equipment and signage for the upcoming work is underway. We anticipate substantial completion on these bridges in 2025. So this graph, it represents the NEPA document limits. And you'll notice that it's showing limits for I-285 East segment and I-285 West segment, and a short segment along SR 400. So we are clearing NEPA from just south of Atlanta Road on the west side to Henderson Road on the east side, on 285, and up to the MARTA Springs Station for the document. The document is the highest environmental document level, which is the EIS, and we're looking to have the PIOH at the end of the year. As similar to the SR 400 graph where it's showing the access points, the green represents direct merge and the gold are the interchanges. Other dates that we anticipate in terms of the procurement for the express lanes phase 1 and 2. As mentioned, SR 400 should be selected this year. I-285 East phase 1, we will start the procurement in late 23 or early 24 with a selection in late 24 or early 25. The I-285 express lanes phase 1 to begin in 2026 and a selection in 2027. And the funding for the projects is included in the planning STIP documents. Also, just wanted to let you know, this is the best information we have now. These dates are subject to change. It's still a lot of work we have to do to make these dates, but this is the best information we have at this time. So now I'll talk a little about the transit. As we mentioned before, when we were looking at the region, it's always been a discussion where should you do transit, extend MARTA, or add additional capacity? Well, with this project, we were able to include both. And the Georgia Express lanes, by incorporating transit, we are offering transit options that currently don't exist. The ELT is an extension of the existing transit services, meaning the buses and the systems are there, but now by including them in the express lanes, we're merging the two systems. By doing this, it also, for the transit users, provides the reliable and faster transit times as well. It helps reduce vehicle emissions and improve air quality for you environmental tree huggers. And I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. It's right for all of us. And it offers more time and attention for other activities if you are utilizing the transit services. So for 400, Express Lanes Transit is incorporated as BRT station, so bus rapid transit. And you'll see in this graph, the circles represent access points. And we currently have funding available to include the construction of the infrastructure for the BRT. So we're stubbing out for the future stations. If some of you live in the area, you may know that MARTA didn't get that mega grant during this cycle, but they will reapply, and they are actively looking to secure funding to design and construct these stations. So we are continuing to coordinate with MARTA concerning the station designs. And we're also building into our contracts with the teams, the developer teams, for them to include in their proposals transit solutions. And they will be scored and it'll be weighted on these solutions to determine the best value proposal. We're seeing that these procurements are a game of inches. So it really helps to drive innovation when you tie performance metrics such as transit to contract. And lastly, we have what we believe occurred, a historic collaboration between the ATL, ARC, MARTA, and the 4 counties on the north end of the corridor. And they got together and developed a plan, and we routed an MOU to focus really on transit for the area. And I-285, as a deliverable to this MOU, is a transit study along I-285 that will inform us to communicate to the industry the best locations and solutions for transit along I-285. So this is a great win for the region where, you know, some areas have been really focused on just their immediate area and their constituents. Well, collaborating together with all of the counties really produced some good work. And we're looking to leverage that collaboration and partnership with helping us solve some of the most complicated transportation issues in the region and keep pace with the growth that we're seeing in Georgia. And as I mentioned, the results of the studies and the work, we should be able to communicate with the industry as the project develops. So with that, incorporating transit into the express lane improves existing transit operations. It promotes transit-oriented development, and the transit vehicles are able to ride the express lanes toll-free. So please stay connected with us on our social media sites, and thank you for your time. Nope.
Thank you, Cleo.
Thank you.
For our next topic, design.
The makers.
Speaker Michelle Pate wasn't able to be here, but Frank Flanders is our speaker for this topic. Frank graduated from Georgia Tech with a BS in Civil Engineering in 2006. He has 16 years of experience with GDOT and held the positions of design engineer, manager in the Office of Roadway Design, and assistant state design policy engineer of the Office of Design Policy and Support. Frank's a licensed in Georgia.
Thanks, Rich. Well, while this is coming up, can everyone hear me okay with this? Oh, it's a virtual. So we'll see. No, it's the other GDOT. That one. There we go. Okay. Got it. All right. Thanks. Okay. Everyone can hear me here, right? In the room. Okay. So Michelle got the flu when we did the summit back in November, and now she got COVID. So I think she just keeps getting sick on purpose. But I'm going to talk today about a new template that we have for design variances on existing roadways. And bear with me, Chris kind of made these, so I'm stealing his presentation a little bit. We looked back at kind of what we've received over the years for design exceptions and variances, and Chris and Doug noticed that that we have a peak that kind of coincides with the end of the calendar year. And so loosely that may indicate that we occasionally get a bump as people head into FFPR trying to make the June let. I'm not sure that's fully the whole trend, but it may be contributing to this. So just don't wait till FFPR to do DEs and DVs is the point to that point. But the next thing is that we're also starting to see like a greater average of DEs and DVs come in, thanks to no small part probably to MMIP. But this represents a lot of man hours for the design community as well as for us to review them. And so we've started to look at the criteria, and they're just a thin band of the things in the Green Book. But there are different project types. As those project types change, the window for lack of a better term, improvisation, kind of grows a little bit, right? On a new construction, brand new road, there's no reason not to meet kind of everything, right? Because you have very few constraints, theoretically. With reconstruction, you're a little more confined, but you're doing more to the roadway. You're changing it substantially. But then existing roads, you're staying on the road. You're not really changing it, and so there's less room to change, but there's also more performance that's sort of available historically for the roadway. So looking at that, about a quarter to a fifth, or a fifth to a quarter actually, of the projects or of the design variances that we received over the last 3 years or so have been on roadway projects that would count as on existing roadways. And so in looking at that and looking at 1.7.3 in the DPM, which kind of lays out your project types for existing roads, right? So you have repair infrastructure condition, reduce your current or anticipated traffic congestion and operational congestion, and reduce your current or anticipated crash patterns. So those are your, kind of project types that 1.7.3 focuses on. And then, it says that the blue that's highlighted is just sort of a focus on the scope, right? Yes, there's multiple reasons often that you undertake a project, but there's usually one big goal and one big purpose. And so one of these three things should be the big goal or purpose when we're looking at projects on existing roads and defining projects on existing roads. And the next thing that's highlighted in red and in yellow are kind of inverses of one another. So the red is just saying that you should make improvements where you can, and the yellow is saying that oftentimes you can't make improvements on these type projects. And so, that kind of underscores sort of the next thing we were looking at with the new design exception variance or design variance template for existing roads, is that it's a existing geometric feature. All right, and then right up under there is that the feature is performing well. So can you document that it's performing well, right? And so those are the three things that 1.7.3 sort of points to for retaining an existing substandard feature. Is it, well, first of all, is it existing, obviously? Then is it performing well? And if so, don't spend your money there, trying to fix what isn't broken. So then taking that and looking at the existing design variance template, we can kind of start to remove some of the sections, right? And so sort of streamline the template and look at what's more important to sort of this focus on existing roads and retaining these substandard features. So we lose the current and future traffic data section. We lose the alternatives considered section. We lose the cost to meet the standard criteria and why the standard can't be met. And all that's because you don't need to do an alternatives analysis when you're saying this is fine as it is. There's no alternative to consider. You're just proving that it's currently working, right? So, but with that, we did add a section, anticipated performance, right? And so your risk assessment sort of slides up in there. That's what the arrow's for. So you've got to look at, is it performing well, right? That's kind of the catch of this whole thing. Because if it's not, then you have a problem, obviously. But in doing that, we have the new template. It's out on roads. In the first little section, you have some check boxes, right? And so you have the three different project types that we discussed, and you pick which one your project proposes to do, or your project is scoped to do. And then at the end of the template, you're stating again, and this is meant for you to check. This is more of a checklist, right? Is that the project type meets the requirements 1.7.3. The existing condition will not be worsened that it performs well today and should continue to perform well, and that you recommend it for retention as the engineer of record, right? So you'll check at least one in the project type, right? And you should be checking all the boxes there at the end. And if you're not checking all the boxes, then this isn't the template for you, right? You need to start looking at alternatives, right? And assessing why you can't, why you couldn't do something else. Now, another thing to note is this is a Green Book based variance, right? So it's geometric stuff. So design speed, stopping sight distance, horizontal, everything but structural loading or structural capacity is available, at least on the FHWA controlling criteria side. On the GDOT standard criteria, you can't do it for rumble strips because that's not a geometric feature. You can't do it for safety edge. That's not a geometric feature. You can't do it for roundabout illumination levels, ped, bike, and transit warrants, the construction standards, and the drainage manual, right? Those aren't geometric. And final note, this is for design variances only. FHWA is not bought into this at this time, so it's just, it's just the variances, right? So if it's an exception, you're going to go the full template route. And all that's kind of or a lot of that is in the head. Let me go back just a little bit. Right there under subject, it lists the things that you cannot use it for as a little additional help there. So we kind of rolled this out right before the summit in November, the GPTQ summit. And so we've collected a few frequently asked questions. I'll go through them real quick. My project meets, strike the is, my project meets one of the project types but shifts the alignment. Can I use the abbreviated template? No, because the underlying assumption is that you're staying on the existing road, right? And that shift in alignment presents possibly the ability to address features. It also may worsen features if you have to make a curve tighter than it is today. So you kind of lose the one-to-one of the before and the after, right? Can I use the template for a portion of my project that does meet 1.7.3? So like a tie-in or a side road, some small portion of an overall project. No, the Green Book is focused on the project type, right? So you've got the money and the focus. Now, I will say that doesn't mean that we don't think you could invoke 1.7.3 in your write-up of full design variance or even a design exception. You just can't use the abbreviated template because with the amount of capital that's invested, you would want to do an alternatives analysis. And then my project meets 1.7.3. Can I use this template for all design variances I may need on the project? And as I stated a little bit before, no, you can only use it for those geometric features, right? And so we've written the ones in the template that it cannot be used for. So that should help. But there's a list again, right? Design structure loading, rumble strips, safety edge, roundabout illumination, and the list goes on. And then finally, can I use this 1.7.3 template or can I use this new template for design exceptions? And the answer is no, you need to use the full exception or the full template for the exception because these are going to FHWA and we're just doing this at a variance level right now. Again, we suggest that you use the logic of 173 if it applies, right? If you're retaining something, you got no problems with it, right? Call on that. I mean, bring that up in the exception. And with that, I'm going to open it to questions because this is new and I feel like we've gotten plenty of questions. So has anyone tried to use this yet? Question? So the question is, and let me back up through all these. If you meet the 4 questions at the end or the 4 check boxes at the end, but you don't meet one of the first 3 check boxes, should you still use the new template? The answer right now is no. I say right now, I mean, I don't see that changing, but just so I don't get caught on something in the future, but no, again, 1.7.3 is for projects on existing roads. So that's sort of the first condition, right? So if you don't qualify as that, then you have to go the full route, or the full template route is the answer. So, yes. Well, guardrail wouldn't be covered in this, right? Because guardrail's not being provided as a geometric feature. It's a safety feature. And if you look at the list, I think I forgot to say this. Most of them are geometric, but like rumble strips, safety edge, your roundabout illumination levels, and a lot of these are safety and not just geometric, right? So that's and not geometric. The guardrail you would need to meet. You would need to do the full template for, right? Because we want to look at alternatives and why we can't provide it. Chapter 11 in the DPM addresses the different, like other project types, of which maintenance projects, specifically preventative maintenance projects, are a part. So some of that allowances, or there's some more latitude in Chapter 11 for the non EDP style projects. That may. Anything else? Thank you, Austin.
Next topic is project visualization, and our speaker is Andrew Poszich. Andrew is a PD, he's been with RS&H 2014. Serves as the design integration lead for the infrastructure strategy. Spent many years in the highway design group. He brings an in-depth understanding of transportation design, overall three-dimensional work, related core engineering.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. All right, everyone. Thanks for hanging around. Normally I'd introduce some kind of corny joke about holding you up for lunch, but we do have a 30-minute networking session following up, so that won't be the case, at least on my conscience. Today's presentation, a little bit different from probably what you've seen thus far. Talk about some visualization that comes out of this industry switch to 3D design. For those in the room that know me, I am a huge proponent of what the 3D design technology can do for us, whether it's OpenRoads, AutoCAD, does not matter. These are visualizations coming out of an engineer's mind. So I'm not a specialist. I don't specialize in visualization. I have a nice cover photo that is done by a professional. But really what I'm hoping to do is to share some insights that we've discovered over the last several years that this new shift in design workflow has enabled us to do, and hopefully pick one or two that you could take home back to your own offices. Not a super formal presentation, guys, so if you have questions throughout, since this is the last slot, feel free to ask them as we're going along while they're on screen, so I'm not bouncing back and forth here. So what is project visualization? To me, visualization is the cusp of being able to better communicate our designs. That can be at the transportation level, the planning level, the construction level, in the field, RFIs, whatever your job is, the need to communicate and visualize what you're doing is essential. That being said, visualization is a lot of different topics. There's a whole bunch of different routes we can go with this presentation, but I'm going to only focus on a few since I'm only with you for a short time today. That's going to be engineering visualization, taking our 3D engineering designs, bringing them forward into a way that the public can understand. How can we bring that into CAD and get a better analysis of how we're doing our designs, using as design aids, not just end products? Touch on classic public engagement. It's been around forever. We're always looking for new and improved public engagement strategies. So I'll make sure to include that as well as talk about interactive media. How are we bringing cool things like 360 images or VR, AR? What's the future look like for the way we communicate and visualize projects? So just to recap, main categories, we'll be getting the 3D CAD analysis, talking about how we're using these design softwares and technologies. Bringing that forward through a lot of new tools that we've been given as industry over the last couple of years. My bread and butter is Open Roads Designer. LumenRT is a great tool for that, but you also have InfraWorks on the Autodesk side that does a great job as well. How do we take those engineering concepts and bring them to the public? PhotoSims is a great example of that, as well as maybe some interactive tools that maybe are not designed for engineers, but we've learned can create a pretty cool experience for your average user. Again, just to reiterate, communication is key. A nice photo sim can do wonders to help the average person not have to interpolate between a plan profile and cross-section sheet. So everything is using communication as a base point from here on out. Now, specifically for 3D CAD analysis, it all starts with the native software. If your project team's using a 3D first workflow, you are able to quickly generate visualization, whether it's in CAD or elsewhere. The idea of having this as a 3D focused design is you know that design's correct. You're not spending an additional effort after the fact putting together a visualization or putting together a 3D model. You're able to jump in and say, yes, this is what our engineers are doing. This is our latest design. So you have a confidence that comes with that. It also easily allows you to understand context. If you have subs you're coordinating with or certain stakeholders, different disciplines working together on this massive project, you're working within that same 3D workspace. Just makes sense. You don't have to guess or interpolate or look at a spreadsheet somewhere or find it buried in a PDF. It's right in your face in front of you, which allows for that improved coordination across disciplines. And to be honest, ever since doing 3D design, it's really just enhanced my design experience. I remember starting off out of school, searching through documents, trying to find out, like calling people up on the phone, spending 20 minutes talking through what a pond layout looks like, what a drain structure is supposed to be. And I can just see it now in a 3D space. So it really helps enhance the way you work and collaborate with different members of your team. So I'm gonna go through a few different topics here. One recommendation I always do if your team's looking to kind of get into this realm is to seek publicly available data. A lot of applications out there now have GIS databases. You can easily get that and gain it and bring that into your project. You have those 3D buildings, you have some terrain surfaces available. There's no longer this need to wait for official survey to get started when you have all of this available at your fingertips. You're able to embrace that and bring it in. Previous slide was InfraWorks. This is Concept Station, two great tools, varying level of use depending on what you're doing, but you're able to make decisions quicker. You're able to get in and understand and not have to coordinate or translate a typical section. Just being able to quickly make several design iterations and educated decisions rather than waiting until a few months in before you start looking at vertical geometry. Part of my favorite thing about doing this workflow is you're truly jumping in and looking at things from all dimensions from day one. So when you set your horizontal, you're immediately jumping in, looking at vertical, and you're able to kind of dissect this workflow. This is kind of where I want to pull the room because this topic can be very on point for a lot of folks. And then some people, maybe this is completely missing the mark. So show of hands, how many people are involved in active design for construction projects? Okay. Keep your hands up if you are working in 3D models. All right. Those hands keep going up more and more as the months and years go on. So Frank and team, good job. Keep things keeping on. So this is not something new or distant. For many of you in the room, you're used to working at these different views. One thing I like to lean into, though, is the dynamic nature of these designs, being able to use a 3D model to make decisions for you. It's a great tool. Just make sure you're taking advantage of it and you're not just kind of isolating it off to that one person in your office that can do all the template work for you. Flash detection, hugely important. I'm just visualizing what in the world's going on underground. It's nothing crazy. If you have the 3D model, there's really no reason not to be running 3D clash detection to understand what's happening. You're really able to get those designs, and even if you're not using an official capacity, even though you're not signing and sealing models, you're able to see and communicate. Bring that into a meeting, have some comp dialogue around the utility clash, and be able to navigate within that 3D space. Makes any meeting fly by that much more smoothly. Something else I like to do is use my 3D model for active review and annotation. You're able to take the Georgia workspace and you can do some pretty cool things with it. That's any CAD environment at all. You can add auto labels, you can add flow arrows that tell you different slopes of the ditch lines. You can look at your culvert crossings, basically making sure your entire project is culminating into a cohesive design deliverable. I use 3D for any of my QCs, even if I'm not signing and sealing the model. I always ask to see what's the model look like, because to me, I'm assuming that my project teams are jumping out ahead and making their decisions based on how things are fitting in geometric space. So basically, short story, just use the tools you have. You can use them in unique different ways. It's not just a means to an end for cross sections. Please lean in and try to figure some things out. Another cool thing we're doing is look for ways to incorporate models into a delivery. Oftentimes we're asking ourselves the question of how do we demonstrate a certain design challenge? In this case, intersection site distance triangles. I mean, very simple from plan view. You guys are used to seeing it, but when you have complex geometry, sometimes looking at things in a third dimension makes it a little easier to understand. And we're actually able to, at a very high level, incorporate that into our plan delivery. Now, this isn't policy, this isn't in guidelines, and if this offends someone by having it in 3D, I'd like to have the reason why that's the case. To me, it helps with the messaging. It's no additional effort or output. I just take a quick snap of a 3D analysis that we're already running and including it in our design sheet. Now, this isn't a pretty picture. It's not going to be posted on some blog or anywhere saying how great of a render it is, but it's using practical 3D visualization within an engineering workflow. Another example of that, we had an RFI down south. We had a simple question. We had the traditional, plan layout. This is a Florida plan set, but there's a lot of callouts in there for station offset, and this is how you build projects, allegedly. Moving forward, though, I can easily see the introduction of 3D models to help span that gap in knowledge. So in this case, we kind of took the traditional callouts of just saying some more information, and we just included a very simple screenshot. The question on the contractor was, how do we build this? And I was like, well, I've been looking at this for the last year and a half in a 3D model, so let's just share with them that image as well. And all of a sudden, that cleared up the questions. We could have just sent them this screen capture, and that would have answered it. But we wanted to make sure that they were aware of the changes, and especially as we're getting into some of those detailed design with the drainage structures and pond grading accordingly. Another thing, how many people in the room have been using reality meshes on their projects? Ooh, not a single hand. So reality meshes are a really cool tool, and they've become more accessible than ever. They're a great way to blend existing and proposed design data, really giving you context to that model, able to visualize what's happening around you. The way I like to see it is it's like bringing a high-res Google Earth 3D view into your modeling environment. And you can jump around, move around the model, and there's different levels of quality. You can get this from survey deliverables. A lot of surveyors are implementing photogrammetry now. There's also a lot of common providers out there that will use it based off aerial data from satellites. And you can pay to have that data shipped in. And even though it may not be survey accurate in all cases, there is still value to have that context. Again, bringing it back to how designers are visualizing the project. You can do this with your cell phone too. Reality meshes are a great tool. If you have some field questions, you have one person out there in the site, being able to jump around, take photos. You can see these kind of little squares here. That's just a representation of where those camera angles were. We had about a week lead out on survey, but we needed an answer that day if you're going to have an aerial conflict with our utilities. So we were able to go out with our phones, capture the surrounding environment, and validate that we did in fact have an issue and get started on a resolution prior to actually being able to get crews out in the field. Useful way, again, visualizing it in CAD. This is not a pretty picture, by the way. That is a pieced together model that we are just happy that it worked, and we got our data points and we went on our merry way. Another great example, emergency response, photogrammetry. Visualize this data, bring it back into the office. You are now taking that field condition, which was originally constructed maybe as a singular photo, and you're able to load it into your CAD model, full dimensions, full analysis, have a conversation. I keep saying that over and over again. It's how we communicate our design intent and how do we really elevate the way we do business. Having this 3D model in a meeting, I can talk through point by point and see where all those damages are versus going through several photos. Maybe they're disjointed. Maybe I'm looking at a plan layout on aerial. The aerial, of course, has the pier standing. But this, in the cases, can be taken in real time and within a day be processed and used in a meeting context. Shifting gears, so that was kind of the CAD level analysis. So again, we're going a little bit more into the pretty picture realm necessarily. So this is light public involvement. I always kind of draw the line between what we do for engineering visualization and our dedicated biz team of what's the exposure? Is this going on a public website, or is this being used to help communicate a message? If I'm comparing alternatives, maybe engineering visualization is perfect. You're getting the point across. It's not going to live in longevity. But if I'm doing a banner for a website, or there's a render video that maybe I need a little more eyes on, it's a very high profile project, you're not going to want me doing that. I have a cool CAD model. It works great for purposes, but I'm going to ship it out to the experts to do that proper visualization. That being said, visualization is now easier to generate than ever. This is a open roads model in CAD that we spent maybe a day bringing into LumenRT for certain meetings. Very easy to do. If you have a 3D design at first, pop it right in, you can export it. Really trying to get those faster turnaround times, as well as focusing on the utility of the graphic over the pure aesthetic. So can I have a conversation off a graphic? Am I able to bring this into a meeting? And probably my favorite way to kind of put this in perspective when people ask me, is it worth the effort? Is I say you're in a meeting with 20 people, you have an hour of their time. Are you going to spend the first half of that meeting showing them a plan profile cross-section, getting everyone on the same page? Or are you going to flash this image up on screen for 30 seconds? And now all of a sudden, everyone in that room is on the same page and understands what we're talking about. That 30 minutes by 20 people, that's 10 hours of time. As long as I can get this render in less than 10 hours, that technically is a time-saving initiative. Not everyone loves that. Certain PMs are gonna be like, I'm not gonna spend money on that. And that's, everyone has their own fish to fry. So take that with a grain of salt, but that's the way I see it. That's the way I sell the meaning. And all of a sudden now we see a lot more LumenRT renders brought into our own internal meetings. I'm not even going public at this point. All with the intention to better convey design information. Now, lean into the third dimension. If you're doing 3D design, most everyone's doing it already. It's a great tool, great purpose, but none of this is possible without jumping and starting with 3D design up front. If you don't have 3D design, then you're basically recreating the wheel every time. And if you're doing a render, you're doing it from scratch. So this workflow does not necessarily apply to you. Wish there was a render of this. There is not though. So moving on to the next one, there is. So CAD to render workflows, 3D open roads model. You got some open bridge stuff. You got some utilities in here. We even went so ahead to put the signal pulse in. And within really half a day, you're able to take that open roads model. We stenciled some shapes. We brought in some striping, added some cars, and now we have something that we feel pretty proud of. Again, you can get something better if you go to specialized visualization workflows, but this was out of CAD. This is my design information. I can jump into this model and pull a measurement, pull a vertical clearance, and I know that vertical clearance is correct. I know that everything there is to the same design specifications that I am using to generate my plan set. Just ease of use too. 2D typical, right? Used to seeing it, varying levels. Everyone uses a typical section. The public does not think of roads this way. I'm sure everyone's well aware. You need a little bit more visual enhancement and fidelity to take that typical section. And it's usually a simple enhancement, being able to go through, for instance, you actually have products out now beyond typicals. I know the owner there, Plug It, great software. That's a great tool for it. Here we just take a 2D typical section, the same one you saw before, brought it into 3D, extruded it, threw on some cars in LumenRT, and within an hour or two, we have a render that tells a little bit better of a story than that classic two-dimensional typical. MOT phasing, another great way. How do you maintain traffic? I'm going to tell a story that the public can understand, that stakeholders can understand. Way easier than a plan layout or some kind of typical section development. Again, utility, communications, messaging, not spending time making it perfect. It gets the point across, and it just gives you additional context in the third dimension. You can do with complex work. Underground utilities, sure, pop in Lumen RT. I didn't even put trees in this one. I just buried it underground and took a picture of it. This one, a little bit more detail into it. We had a utility sump relocation, showing what happens before and showing what that condition looks like afterwards. A couple hours of work in Lumen RT. The 3D CAD was already there. Easy to do. Design clarifications. What happens when I decide to move an inlet or an outfall with RFI or request for modification, or there's an issue in the field? What does that look like? I can render it in 3D. I just take a screenshot, put in Lumen RT, walk people through the project. Quick design context. Someone asks, what does this look like for my property? How many people go and say, oh, I'll give you a cross section to show you how tall that noise wall looks like, or how tall the bridge is. Yeah, sure, it works. But really what they're looking for is, if I'm standing in my backyard, am I going to be this little guy dwarfed by the noise wall? The answer in this case is yes. That is a very tall noise wall, and sometimes you do not appreciate that until you see it in a 3D modeling perspective. I think I'm pretty good on time here, but I'm going to go ahead and keep on keeping on. Any questions thus far? Pick one or two if you had it. All right, we'll keep on plowing forward then. Going back to public engagement strategies, this is, again, kind of where you ask the question is, are engineering visualizations enough? Going to go to a Viz team? That's, each project's different. But essentially, no matter what the case is you're looking to have clear communication. You want to be able to communicate your design changes, policies, alternatives, concepts. Whatever you're doing, communication needs always going to be there. But more importantly to me is, I'm trying to show the public how they're going to interact with the facility. It's not just the design information. They don't necessarily care if the cross slope is meeting standard, but they want to know how it's going to look, from their house, how will it impact there, as well as being able to hopefully get buy-in is ultimately sometimes the goal. Depends on the high-level nature of the project or not. And then using these engagement strategies, a lot of the time it's a balance between this budget and accessibility. So going through a few different examples of different variations and levels. So just kind of take it, relate it back to projects you may have worked on in the past, and we'll go from there. Love this image, very beautiful, very pristine. I did not make it, but you have those needs for traditional visual renders at some point. So keep in mind, that's always a tool at your disposal, whether you sub it out, have a dedicated Viz team, or however you get there. There will always be a time and a need for those cover photos. However, I like the simple stuff. I have a 3D model already made. I can cut a bridge typical, generate that within 30 minutes if the model's already created. Photo simulations, another great tool at your disposal. To me, they're honestly some of the easiest. Photo simulations are actually not that expensive to do if the 3D model's already there. Just find your drone shot, find whatever angle works for you, and incorporate it into your design. I'll even be the lazy route. If I want to give context to my road, I'll just jump in Google or Street View. You can save out that Street View photo, drop a Lumen RT typical section in, and with some very low-level photoshopping, which again, no expert in, but I can mask and clip. Most, I think, Gen Zs out of college can do that using their phones now. But as you go through, great way to demonstrate someone driving the road, what are you going to experience as you experience it? Simple as effective. So this is something that to some may look like a large visualization effort. To us, this is a lazy solution to a very simple problem. We had one property owner that really wanted to know what was happening. They lived here, and they had a new cul-de-sac, rightfully so. You used to have a road that went through, now you have your private cul-de-sac. To me, that's a huge property value bonus, but hey, we'll see how that goes. But coming through, we had a terrain surface, so your DTM, your triangles, land XML file, however you get it. We took some 2D shapes and we draped them over the surface. We didn't really have a full built out 3D model for this one. And within probably about a day, day and a half, we were able to go in, kind of somewhat recreate his property and then take different angles to kind of show him, hey, yes, this project's going to actually be an improvement for you. You're going to have less vehicles driving past your house. And we were able to get the buy-in from the property owner in question. Another thing I like to do is to incorporate into existing content. You kind of saw an example of those 3D PDFs earlier of just including a CAD render. But if I have a role plot at a public meeting or for a proposal or whatever I'm doing, I have the model anyways. I might as well showcase it and use it as a tool for explanation. Even if we are working with other trained professionals in industry, it's always helpful to kind of add that additional layer of quality of life improvement. You can show them what you're talking about. There's no mistranslation or misunderstanding or room for interpolating it differently. Shout out to in the earlier presentation of virtual meetings and reviews. There is actually a great use of this. You're able to incorporate everything you've seen thus far into a virtual meeting in order to get people kind of the ability to click around, visualize it at their own pace, and interacting with your content. I'm not going to spend too much time on that though. We'll jump over to interactive media, try to catch up on some time here. I have the saying, interactivity drives engagement. That is true. The more people can interact with your content, the longer time they will spend with that content. So it encourages users to spend more time digesting. It's great for kind of broader educational purposes as well. So think not just project specific information, you can also use it as an agency to help maybe new initiatives that rolled out. In this case, we did a Complete Streets website that was very intuitive, or at least we thought it was intuitive, but at least it was interactive, giving people the chance to kind of explore a complete street on their own. With the underlying thing is if you make things complicated, people aren't going to use it. So whatever you do has to be accessible to the average user, and be able to take that with you as you move forward. I have a slide on AR, VR, XR, MR, all the cool things that I am not going to talk about. There's plenty of people out there that have presentations of how cool the future is going to be. As cool as I think it is, as much of a proponent of VR that I have my own headset, I think we're still a few years out for that becoming mainstream, but there are some use cases. If you're interested into it, feel free to look those up. We're using them also as a company, but it's not quite something that I think everyone needs on every project just yet. That being said, I do have a few examples here. To be honest, I'm not sure how the Wi-Fi or internet's going to work. So I'm just going to do this a very high level overview, and then we're just going to open it up for questions since I kind of consolidated this presentation down a little bit. A few last things to talk about in terms of interactivity. Up in here left-hand corner, how many people have done 2D KMZs for Google Earth? Keep your hand up if you've ever done a 3D KMZ. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4 of you in the room. Great tool. If you've done 2D KMZs, good news. It's basically the exact same process for 3D. You just got to be in a 3D file, and you can export your model. Google Earth has some kind of size limitations. You can't do every single part of the project, or maybe you're just doing a shell of the project and not getting as much detail. Great way to pull it up in a meeting, sharing with someone who doesn't have CAD, let them jump in, pull it up in Google Earth, interact with the design. You can even jump down to Street View, so that's kind of cool in its own regards. Up in the top right, you see story maps. I do have an example of a few different types of story maps that kind of provide a great level of interactivity. If you haven't heard of story maps before, it is kind of an Esri solution of a way that anyone can really build a website. So even beyond just that story maps, any product out there that allows you to visualize content on the web, you can integrate it into several of these other methods. I like story maps because it's kind of a scrolly where you just scroll through and the information is fed to you. That way there's no deviating off course. You can maybe include some information down the line, and it walks people through it. I'm not going to spend too much time diving into that. That's a whole presentation to itself. Reality model viewers, just being able to get these in the hands of people. They're free, they're web-based. You can put your project, including the reality mesh, online for those to see and walk through it to kind of get a better understanding. 180 drive-throughs, great experience. You can do those through professional visualization services, or you can do that in CAD and just get a rough experience of what it looks like. Send someone a video file, post it on SharePoint, Vimeo, YouTube, whatever your group uses, and let people kind of dive in from there. And the last thing I do want to pull up quickly before we switch over to questions is the use of 360 project tours. And I am going to tease this and probably have a website link that did not translate well. And it looks like that is correct. It did not translate. if you're interested in it, I can walk you through it, but on the sake of time, we do have a few minutes here for questions. Probably pull up the website here. Oh, nope, it is down right now, so never mind. So that's kind of it. Thank you guys.